Before you open your mouth, you've already won or lost. Most people never figure that out. They rehearse what they're going to say, they think about their pitch, their joke, their opener, and they walk in completely blind to the fact that the verdict was handed down before a single word left their lips. The brain doesn't wait for your argument. It doesn't care about your credentials. In roughly 150 milliseconds, less time than it takes to blink, it has already sorted you, dominant or weak, alive or hollow, worth attention or not. That's not an opinion, that's neuroscience. And once you really sit with it, it changes how you move through the world. Nietzsche understood something about this long before brain imaging existed. His concept of the will to power wasn't just abstract philosophy, it was an observation about human perception. People aren't drawn to those who argue their worth. They're drawn to those who project it, quietly, without asking for permission. Ortega y Gasset put it differently. The mind surrenders to impression before reason even gets dressed in the morning. The first 10 seconds aren't a warm-up. They're the whole game, a silent battlefield where invisible signals decide outcomes that logic will spend the rest of the conversation trying to catch up with. Here's where it gets interesting, though. Here's the part most people miss entirely. Overcompensating kills it. The puffed-up chest, the aggressive eye contact held just a beat too long, the smile that's been practiced in the mirror until it looks exactly like a smile. All of that repels. It reads as effort, and effort reads as need. And need is the single most unattractive signal a human being can broadcast. The paradox at the heart of first impressions is this. The less you appear to be trying, the more magnetic you become. The most powerful people in any room are not the ones performing power. They're the ones who have simply stopped needing to. There's a difference between acting confident and being it, and every nervous system in that room can feel it. Cleopatra didn't conquer Caesar and Antony through force or argument. She constructed a presence, layered, attentive, precise, that made being in her orbit feel like a privilege. Machiavelli wrote plainly that perception is power, that a ruler who appears virtuous commands loyalty before a single action can be judged. These aren't just historical curiosities. They're observations about something fundamental in human wiring that hasn't changed in 2,000 years. We are not persuaded in the first moments. We are captivated, or we aren't. And the science keeps confirming it. Social psychology experiments show consistently that small cues, the angle of your posture, the steadiness of your gaze, the micro-tension or ease in your face, predict outcomes in attraction, leadership, and negotiation better than what's actually said. Confidence is genuinely contagious. So is anxiety. When you carry composure into a room, something in the people around you responds to it involuntarily, mirroring trust back at you before they've consciously decided anything. But tip even slightly into transparent overconfidence, and the same mechanism reverses. It triggers suspicion, resistance, the instinct to pull back. This is the tension that makes the first 10 seconds so difficult to master. Too little, and you disappear. Too much, and you repel. The art lives in that narrow, precise middle. Strength that doesn't announce itself, presence that doesn't demand acknowledgement. It doesn't stop at what they can see either. The tone of your voice, the pace at which you speak, the rhythm of how you move, whether you enter a room like you're apologizing for existing or like the room simply reorganized itself around your arrival. Mystery and Neil Strauss demonstrated this obsessively. Voice modulation, timing, the controlled use of silence. These aren't charm school tricks. They're the interface between instinct and desire. Schopenhauer would have agreed, in his own bleak way. Humans are driven by attraction long before reason shows up to rationalize it. The first impression is the invisible script. It runs before your dialogue does, and if you ignore it, it doesn't matter how sharp your words are. The stage was already set against you. So if the first 10 seconds are a verdict, the next question is what you're actually radiating when that verdict gets delivered. Not what you're saying, not even what you're doing, what you are in that moment at the level of energy. Every person in that room is scanning you without knowing they're doing it. Your emotional charge, the rhythm of your movement, the quality of your attention, these create an aura that either pulls people in, pushes them away, or, worst of all, leaves them indifferent. Indifference is the real failure. Not hatred, not conflict, indifference. The room simply doesn't register you as significant. Presence is the antidote to that. Not performance, presence. There's a distinction that matters enormously. Performance is external, visible, effortful. Presence is internal, contained and felt rather than observed. Nietzsche called it radiating power effortlessly. Ortega y Gasset called it being compelling. What they were both pointing at is the same thing. When your attention is fully directed, your energy contained and deliberate, your inner state coherent, it communicates potency at a frequency that bypasses conscious thought entirely. Here's what trips people up though. They think projecting energy means amplifying it. Bigger gestures, wider smile, more animation. It doesn't. It often means the opposite. The most magnetic people tend to be oddly calm, intensely alive underneath it, but outwardly contained, almost understated, like there's something happening inside them that they're choosing, carefully, not to spill. That controlled stillness is what people find themselves staring at and can't explain why. It's not nothing, it's precision. An orchestra where every instrument is playing exactly what it should, nothing wasted, nothing forced. The physical mechanics of this are simpler than people expect. Feet grounded, spine relaxed but upright, gestures open rather than closed. The pace at which you walk into a space, not rushed, not performatively slow, just deliberate. Your voice finding its natural lower register rather than climbing with anxiety. These aren't poses, they're the external signature of an internal state, and the body learns them or it doesn't. Mystery talked about this. The practiced seducer moves as though the environment bends around him, as though gravity works slightly differently in his vicinity. That's not arrogance. That's a person who has made peace with taking up space. Attention is what directs all of it. Eye contact that is present rather than predatory. The kind of focus that makes another person feel, for a moment, like the most interesting thing in the room, because you've decided, genuinely, that they are. That quality of attention signals something rare. That you are not looking for validation, not scanning for exits, not half elsewhere in your own head. You're here, fully, and you've chosen to direct that here at them. It's an extraordinary thing to give someone in a world full of distraction. And simultaneously, and this is critical, your self-possession signals that you don't need anything back. That duality, intensity without hunger, attention without desperation, is the specific combination that triggers fascination. The brain reads it as safety and danger at once. It wants to stay near it. Context matters too. Cleopatra understood that staging is part of the story, that the setting, the light, the deliberate construction of an entrance amplified everything she brought to it. Walking into chaos with calm precision doesn't just make you noticeable, it makes you feel stabilizing and exciting simultaneously, which is an almost irresistible combination. Walk in already scattered, already leaking anxiety, and the room feels it before you've spoken to a single person. Energy moves. It's contagious in the most literal neurological sense. A controlled, deliberate emotional presence shapes the mood of everyone around you. Their receptivity, their engagement, what they're willing to feel in your presence. You can set the tone for an entire interaction in the first 10 seconds without ever intending to. The question is whether you're doing it consciously or whether you're just leaking whatever's happening inside you and calling it personality. Then comes the moment words start to matter. Not all words, the first ones. The first gesture towards storytelling, the first sentence that either opens something in the mind of the person you're talking to or closes it quietly and permanently. What makes an introduction compelling isn't cleverness, it's architecture. The way it builds a small tension, implies something just out of reach, makes the mind lean forward slightly without knowing why. Humans are wired for narrative. We are, at our core, story processing machines, and we respond to narrative tension, unresolved questions, and implied depth the way a plant responds to light, automatically, helplessly, without deliberation. Cleopatra's conversations were never simple. They were layered, intelligence woven through playfulness, mystery threaded through intimacy. Machiavelli's observation that appearances outweigh reality in political life applies equally to the social. A story that suggests competence, depth, and imagination is more persuasive in 10 seconds than a resume of actual accomplishments delivered in 10 minutes. You're not trying to explain yourself in that opening. You're trying to make someone wonder about you. The hardest balance to strike is this. You have to be revealing enough to intrigue and withholding enough to sustain it. Overshare and the tension collapses. There's nothing left to want. Say too little and you become opaque rather than mysterious. The art is calibrated disclosure. Give them enough that their mind begins constructing a story about you. Hold back just enough that they want to find out if they're right. Mystery and Strauss called these open loops, micro-stories, evocative half-gestures, remarks that trail off at exactly the right moment, leaving the other person carrying a question they didn't ask for, but can't quite put down. The neuroscience here is elegant. Unresolved narrative patterns trigger dopamine. The brain anticipates resolution and rewards itself for staying engaged. An ironic comment, a slightly paradoxical observation, a hint of something shared. These activate cognitive mechanisms that make the other person involuntarily curious, unconsciously invested in whatever you say next. You haven't just introduced yourself. You've made them a participant in something without asking their permission. But, and this matters, the narrative has to resonate with something already alive in them. A brilliant observation that lands in the wrong emotional field creates dissonance rather than connection. This is why reading the room, reading the person, adjusting tone and reference almost in real time, it's not optional polish, it's structural. The story isn't just about you. At its best, it becomes a mirror reflecting something they already desire or fear or find fascinating. That's when it stops being charming and becomes genuinely magnetic. Humor is one of the most powerful tools in this. Not jokes, but the quality of wit that implies a mind working slightly faster than expected, that finds the unexpected angle, that challenges slightly while offering just enough safety. Marilyn Monroe's entire public presence was this. Vulnerability and playfulness, openness and mystery, incompleteness made irresistible. In 10 seconds, micro-narratives built around that kind of tension don't just interest people. They embed in memory, in the emotional body, below the level of conscious thought. The goal is not to dominate the first exchange. It's to make the other person realize, somewhere underneath their thinking, that they want more of this. That's the hook. Everything else is the line. By now, energy has drawn attention. The narrative has opened curiosity. But neither of those things, alone, creates trust. Trust requires something more subtle, something that happens almost entirely below the threshold of awareness, and it's called mirroring. Mirroring, done right, is almost invisible. It's the gentle, calibrated reflection of another person's posture, breathing, speech rhythm, micro-expressions, and what it communicates without words is, I am like you. The brain, encountering this, relaxes. The instinctive threat assessment softens. Something that feels like familiarity, like comfort, begins to build. Usually before either person understands what's happening or why. The paradox is that forced mirroring is immediately detected and destroys everything. The timing is off by a half beat, the gesture slightly too deliberate, and suddenly the warmth flips into unease. Authenticity is the only vehicle through which this works. Which means it has to come from actual attentiveness. Genuinely watching, genuinely listening, adjusting micro-movements in response to what you're actually perceiving. Renaissance diplomats understood this. Seduction strategists have systematized it for decades. The principle is old and reliable. Alignment at the subconscious level opens doors that logic, charm, and argument simply cannot. If someone leans forward slightly, reflecting that posture, just enough, never mimicry, signals engagement and empathy. Matching the cadence of their speech, the pace of their gestures, even the rhythm of their breathing, creates resonance that registers physically before it registers mentally. The other person experiences, fleetingly, the rare sensation of being understood without explanation. That sensation is remarkable in its rarity. Most people spend their entire lives not quite feeling it. The person who gives them even a brief taste of it, without appearing to try, becomes memorable in a way that's almost impossible to articulate. Here's what makes this genuinely sophisticated, though. You're not copying. You're selecting. You mirror the cues that reinforce your energy and narrative while maintaining the thread of your own presence. True connection is not imitation. It's selective resonance. The people most compelling to be around are not those who reflect everything back like a blank surface. They're the ones who resonate with you while remaining unmistakably themselves. The brain recognizes the similarity and relaxes, but it's the mystery of the difference that keeps it interested. Similarity creates safety, individuality creates fascination. Both together, that specific combination is what holds attention. Timing matters enormously here. Mirroring in the first few seconds carries disproportionate weight. It primes the observer's mind for everything that follows, making them receptive to your energy, your narrative, your subsequent moves. The unconscious decision about whether you're trustworthy happens faster than thought, and once it's made, it's remarkably resistant to revision. Every small, mirrored nuance in those early seconds is a vote cast in your favor in a process the other person doesn't know is happening. The research on this is consistent and striking. Even minimal mimicry of facial expressions increases liking and perceived similarity. The mirror neuron system, arguably one of the most socially significant structures in the human brain, is tuned with extraordinary sensitivity to detect resonance in others. The skilled influencer doesn't force these responses. They orchestrate them, gently, without ever revealing the mechanism. You become the quiet conductor of their emotional state before they've decided anything consciously. Presence, narrative, mirroring. Each layer builds on the last. Attention becomes curiosity, curiosity becomes rapport. Rapport becomes something that outlasts the conversation. But the real question, the one that separates people who are noticed from people who are remembered, is what you leave behind when the 10 seconds are over. The brain doesn't store experiences equally. Emotions are the filing system. Anything that carries emotional charge, curiosity, amusement, a flicker of challenge, even a hint of unresolved tension, gets encoded more deeply, revisited more often, held with more clarity. A neutral encounter fades. An emotionally textured one lingers and, curiously, tends to improve in memory. You become more interesting in their recollection than you even were in person. This is where micro-detail becomes everything. A perfectly timed pause, a trace of humor in the eyes at a moment when humor wasn't expected, a slight deviation from what people usually do in that kind of interaction. Something the brain flags immediately as worth storing. Psychology calls this the von Riestorff effect. The thing that stands out gets remembered. Applied to human presence, it means that one small, calibrated break from predictability, one moment of controlled asymmetry, one beat of genuine unexpectedness, can make an encounter emotionally sticky in a way that a full hour of pleasant, forgettable conversation cannot. The masters of this, Cleopatra, Monroe, the great political orators, the seducers worth studying, didn't achieve enduring impact through force or volume or extraordinary effort. They achieved it through strategic subtlety. Every gesture was calibrated not to impress superficially, but to plant something. A seed of curiosity, an emotional echo, a question that doesn't resolve itself easily. People are not drawn back, in memory or in reality, to those who gave them everything. They're drawn back to those who left a slight incompleteness, something worth returning to, something the mind keeps circling. Sensory layering amplifies this. Memory is composite. People don't remember just what you said or just how you looked. They remember the whole texture of being near you. Voice, expression, posture, even the way you occupy physical space, when these form a coherent whole, when they feel like expressions of the same internal state rather than a collection of practiced techniques, the impression is seamless and therefore more powerful. The more natural it feels, paradoxically, the more it sticks. Engineered displays get forgotten. Authentically coherent ones don't. Then there's provocation. Not aggression, but the deliberate engagement of the other person's imagination. Ambiguity, handled carefully, makes the mind work. A hint of complexity, a playful contradiction, something left slightly open, these prompt people to begin constructing narratives about you that extend beyond what actually happened. Monroe was a masterclass in this. Her vulnerability paired with wit, her openness shadowed by mystery, created a psychological loop that people returned to without understanding why. In the first 10 seconds, planting even a small version of that loop is among the most durable forms of influence available. Consistency with variation. Rhythm with surprise. These aren't aesthetic preferences, they're neurological signals. A presence that moves with coherent, deliberate rhythm reads as stable and competent, but pure consistency without novelty becomes background noise. The combination, familiar enough to feel safe, different enough to feel alive, is what makes an encounter stay active in someone's mind, rather than filing itself away under forgettable. What all of this amounts to is this: the first 10 seconds are a blueprint. Not just for how this interaction will go, but for how this person will experience you the next time they see you, think about you, or talk about you to someone else. The unconscious has already made its assessment. You either shaped that assessment deliberately, or you left it to chance. Mastering this doesn't require learning a new set of tricks. It requires cultivating something more fundamental: awareness, precision, the ability to be genuinely present rather than narrating your own performance in your head. The tiniest misalignment unravels it. But the right orchestration requires almost no visible effort. That's the paradox at the center of all of this. The more internally precise you become, the more effortless it appears from the outside. The first 10 seconds are brief, almost insultingly so, but their shadow is long. The only question worth sitting with is whether you're walking into rooms shaping perception, or simply hoping it goes well.